Kenya Abbott Jr., and we're back with another episode of PoliticKen. I am so excited to be joined by Black Market Realty and Foster Gives Black and many more. We'll be engaging in a conversation around race in Detroit, discussing issues like gentrification, politics, and what this means for neighborhoods in the future. So sit back, relax, and get ready to enjoy a good show. Our first guest today is Darius Barrett, an innovator, community investor, and humanitarian. How are you today, Darius?
I'm great. Thanks for asking me to be on the show.
I'm so excited for you to be here. And so I'm just going to jump right into it. I know that you're a part of this group, Black Market Realty.
Yes.
You guys are in the community. I just want you to tell the people a little bit about what it is that you all do, what's your role in it, and kind of what made you get into this work.
Okay, what made me get into Black Market Realty or real estate in general itself was because I'm from Detroit. I love the city of Detroit, right? So when you're in the city, you can see the devastation, right? When people ask you, is Detroit as bad as it really is? No, I'm from here. This is my city. So I see the devastation in the residential neighborhood. So I decided that I wanted to make an impact, right? This was my calling. This is where I could be beneficial to the community. So that was one of the reasons why we got into it. And what was the other question?
So basically, what is the group all about, Black Market Realty, and what exactly do you all do?
Right, great question. So the Black Market Realty is all about giving people the opportunity to be owners instead of renters. Statistics state right now that majority of the Black community within Detroit are renters. And that's a no-no, right? That's a big no-no because now you're just renting. You don't own anything. You don't have anything tangible, right? You don't have an asset, right? You don't have anything that can appreciate a wealth or anything that you can even pass down to your family, right? So we're giving people the opportunity to be homeowners, right? So with how the auction is set up right now, you have to have a $10,000 buy-in, right? A lot of people don't have $10,000 sitting around, right? You can actually buy a house right now for $2,000, $5,000, right? So you might have that $5,000, but you don't have that $10,000 to even open up an account. So we're giving people the opportunity to actually be a part of the auction without having that $10,000 deposit, right? So we actually we're a consulting real estate company as well. So we'll do the land work. We'll go find you a house that's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, whatever you're looking for, right? Get 5 different options, and then we'll go through different options and figure out, okay, what are you willing to pay for this house in the auction? And then we'll go through the whole process and get you that house. So we offer people a service that you can't get without having a large capital.
And so with that, one of the things you just mentioned, you were talking about how now, more residents are renters over owners. And that's something that's a huge transition because Detroit was actually known for people owning homes. And so how much do you think that's playing a role in gentrification? And is that really impacting people as far as people are being pushed out of the city?
Yes. I think gentrification is definitely a big deal. You see it all around us, right? You see downtown. Downtown look wonderful though. You can't lie. It's beautiful, right? Midtown looks great. And that's all because of gentrification, right? And gentrification, the definition of gentrification, let's be honest, is pretty much moving the poor out, bringing in businesses, bringing in more middle class, more wealthier people that can sustain that economy. So I think it's really impacting the downtown area, the midtown area. I don't really see it impacting a lot of residential areas, except for the wealthier ones, like University Village, which is by U of D, and Mary Grove, Indian Village. Those areas are being gentrified, of course. But areas outside of that, you don't really see a lot of gentrification, right? Because with gentrification, you need a lot of resources, right? You need public officials, you need polices, firemen to patrol the area because with gentrification, if you're going to gentrify the area and redevelop the area, you need people to protect the area as well. So you don't really see a lot of that in the residential areas. So that's why there's an opportunity for small investors to get in right there. It's kind of too late, let's be honest. It's kind of too late to get in Midtown and downtown because we don't, as Black people, or as myself, I don't have the wealth, the substantial amount of wealth to actually buy downtown right now. So I look forward to the residential areas.
And so how exactly is Black Market Realty getting community more involved? And why should people even reach out to you guys?
Right. So we're getting more involved in the community because we are rehabilitating homes that have been abandoned. You see a lot of blighted communities, right? And that's what we don't want, right? We don't want blighted houses in our neighborhoods, our communities, because now we have kids in these neighborhoods. A lot of people don't if you go to the east side of Detroit, you see there's probably 2 houses on 1 block, right? And that's just because of the neighborhood that's been devastated, right? So we're trying to give back to the community by taking these homes, taking these abandoned homes, rehabilitating them, and putting a family in them. So now that family that was renting before, now they can actually own a home.
And I'm so happy about the work that Black Market Realty is doing in the community, specifically in Detroit, right? And so how can people get in contact with you all?
So we can be contacted via our social media. The business page is at Revere Estates, at REVERE.estate, where we post a lot of our rehabilitation projects. We also give highlights on do-it-yourself projects, and also give highlights to some of the redevelopment that's going on downtown and midtown. And I also can be reached at my personal page is at Darius Roo, DARIUSROO.
And we'll make sure that we put all of that information on our website. And thank you so much for joining me today, Darius.
Thank you.
And thank you all for, constantly doing this work in the community. We need more people like you. So excited for these 3 individuals to be joining me today. First, I have Travis Foster. He's a founder of Foster Gives Black, a community activist, as well as the operator of the only Black-owned fundraising firm in Michigan. Hello, Travis.
Hi.
I also have Jennifer Owenu. She's a social worker, feminist, and a collectivist. Welcome, Jen. And lastly, I have Eric Lofquist. He's a graduate student at the University of Detroit Mercy, a neighborhood advocate, as well as a Challenge Detroit Fellow. Hello, Eric.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you for joining. So we're just gonna jump into it. We all know what this topic's about this week. We're talking about race in Detroit. We all know race is a social construct. And for people that don't know what social construct is, meaning that it was created, right? And so with that, is race relevant in 2017?
Absolutely.
Race is probably the most relevant thing in 2017. If there was any trend or any topic that was discussed consistently and brought up in almost every facet, race is it.
That's what I'm saying, right? And so I think it's interesting because people always think, okay, we're past those times, right? I remember for so many years hearing we're post-racial, we don't have to deal with that, we don't have to play the black card anymore, use the race card, but it's happening, right? And places like Detroit, I think it's very evident when we start seeing who's owning Detroit, right? And so when we look at conversations around gentrification or the midtown, downtown development, what does that look like for y'all? And do y'all think that gentrification is all about this whole idea of pushing blacks out and moving whites in? What does this look like for us in Detroit? And anyone can jump in.
Well, I mean, I guess I can start on this because I live in Midtown, which is one of the areas that, folks say has been gentrified. And I think it has its pros and its cons. Am I with it? Absolutely not, because of the simple fact that we're not rebuilding our neighborhoods where the true issues are. Okay, so if we're not focusing on that and building up the people that have been here for so long and recreating a positive vibe in the communities that can stop all of the issues and the ills that we have in Detroit, then why are we focusing on an area that those folks can't even really access? You can come hang out in downtown, but how much are you really accomplishing other than kind of walking around and just hanging out? And it's funny because I've been really reading up on like how race kind of got to where it is in the modern era. So from the 80s to now, the Reagan era, and the biggest thing, and I really encourage you all to do a ton of research on this, is the current era of where we are from a racial standpoint started with the 100-to-1 crack ratio back in the 80s. That's what really villainized black people in the modern era. And it's so important for us to understand that those laws that were put into place actually contributed to the gentrification, because black folks were viewed as, we don't have money, we're criminals, we're all of these things, and that's where this ball kind of really got start rolling.
Anybody?
Kind of what Travis was discussing. When you think about bringing back any major city, if you want to invest money into your city or you want your city to look good, that money is going to go into the downtown. The people who they let in the downtown are people who have the money. Unfortunately, the people who have the money don't look like you and I. And it's just it's difficult, especially when we talk about bringing back Detroit and the resurgence of Detroit, because we talk about all these new developers, all these new people coming, and it's just like, what incentive do the people who never left, who have been faithful Detroiters, what do they get? Like we said, the whole that not translating back into the neighborhoods. I'm seeing some little things, but not as big as the overhauls and the movement and the quickness of the way that they are doing things downtown. So it's just the idea of the race is, I don't want to say it's not relevant. I don't think it's about pushing blacks out. I don't think it's about pushing native Detroiters out. It's like the way they need to build it up. Those people who there just don't have it, and unfortunately, we don't get to benefit from it either.
I think that for me, I don't really have a problem with behind at the same time. And so I feel like as a white person, as someone from the suburbs, like who's going to be moving into the city relatively soon, I feel like you need to have a conscience when you do that. You need to become a neighbor, you need to attend meetings, you need to I don't know. I think that it's a challenging space to navigate, and it's not always my space to navigate. And so I think that you definitely need to do a lot of self-reflection on that, and just definite thinking as you move forward in that space.
If I can add to that though, so my realm is fundraising. So I really am involved in, kind of those dollar amounts and who's putting money into what and what incentivizes individuals to reinvest in Detroit. And Stephen Ross is a big-time real estate investor, usually out of New York, but doing a lot of work and trying to do more work in the Detroit area. And so this is important because he just invested, along with a couple other folks, $25 million back into Detroit neighborhoods to rebuild those neighborhoods. Well, when you hear $25 million, you're like, oh, that's awesome. That's a good amount of money. But when you look at the scope of what needs to be done, 25 million is a drop in the bucket. I mean, it's nothing essentially, and we appreciate it, but how far can 25 million go in comparison to the dollars that they're pushing into downtown Detroit? We're talking about billions into downtown Detroit, but 25 million, they can only do some cleanup in the Brightmoor area, which is what they're planning to do. But it's not even a fair comparison when you look at what their priorities are. And Stephen Ross is a good dude, but it's just not enough to really have some substantial impact.
And I think also, just to add on, it sounds like a common thing is just being able to leverage what capital looks like for all, and I think that the big thing for me when it comes to the word gentrification and what it looks like, it's this idea that not only are these people being pushed out and the people with it can stay, but these people still don't have. So now they're still, out in this world. They have to fend for themselves, and there's an economic disparity that we're not talking about. It's more than just displacing people. It's more than just allowing people to go. It's about trying to give people equal opportunity and equal effort to be able to live, essentially, in society. And so it's just a lot going on in the news. And I know that the first question was so funny, right? Is race relevant when we got all of these issues going on around what? We got Trump in office right now. I know we just had the Kid Rock protest, and I want to jump into this just a little bit because I want to know, are we picking our battles wisely, right? I seen the controversy come up when Kid Rock opened up at the Little Caesars Arena in downtown Detroit, and it was just so big with controversy, but are we really picking our battles the correct way, and is that something that we should even be fighting against right now?
Absolutely. The only reason why, like we said, the idea, especially a place like Detroit, where we know, like one of the biggest places from the Great Migration, that big influx of blacks coming from the south to the north. Detroit was one of those hub cities. We have an iconic mayor like Coleman Young, who was able to put blacks in positions of power in Detroit and leverage for them and give them opportunity. It's just like historically, Detroit is a strong black city, and for somebody like Kid Rock to claim Detroit as his hometown, even though he didn't live here or whatever, have a permanent piece in this new big arena downtown, give him a restaurant downtown, and then allow him to give the comments that he makes and all of the different things he say in a way he riles up individuals with the flag. I feel like it's total disrespect to people who live here and people who have invested in Detroit over time for, when Detroit is back and looking like something, Kid Rock just get to come in and claim King of Detroit. It's disrespectful.
And furthermore, here's the more pressing issue that we always seem to gloss over when it comes to this. So you gave an excellent, overview of the Kid Rock situation. But look at it like this in a broader perspective. From an investment standpoint, okay? The Illich family who owns Little Caesar Arena, okay? They are the ones that allow him to set up that Kid Rock Cafe or whatever it is, right? So let's look at that from a moral standpoint. They know this man's background. They know what he's been up to. They know, all his Confederate flag and that type of deal. But they're still willing to allow him and accept his money to set up that restaurant with the biggest sign ever in the blackest city in America. You just have to look at the level of disrespect that they're showing to us, right? I mean, and it's subconscious. So we have to really understand, like, look, okay, Kid Rock has the restaurant, but who allowed him to do that? And then we have to go after those systems because they're the ones that are pulling the trigger. How many other investors could have had that restaurant? But they chose Kid Rock for a specific reason because he has a base of white folks that are going to come down into the city and hang out at his restaurant. If it was Travis's, Hard Rock Cafe, they'd be like, I'm not going there, like, who is this dude, right? So this is strategic, and we can't overlook, like, we're blaming Kid Rock, but somebody took Kid Rock's money and somebody was responsible for continuing that system of overt oppression.
I think the point you brought up, Kenya, on picking the battles is an interesting one because I think that everybody has battles that they can pick, and there's often times when people don't have the privilege to be able to decide what battles that they fight. And so for me, as a person coming from some amount of privilege, I think that, like, my biggest passions are in children's advocacy, and so those are the sorts of battles that I'm able to pick and be the most effective at. And so I just feel like everyone has a space that they can start picking their own battles.
And I also just think it's so important, when you talk about looking outside and being able to look at, okay, Kid Rock's the face, right, of what's the problem or the protest or whatever, but there is a root that has led to that. And the reason why I brought up picking battles is just because there's so much other stuff going on in the city, right? Just in 2015, I mean, we were looked at as a human crisis here with us not having access to water. This is a basic need, and we have over 30,000 people in the city of Detroit, which is surrounded by Great Lakes, that don't have access to water. Then you think about Flint, and it's just like, okay, something's not right here because we're protesting a concert. But people can't have water, people don't have shelter, people don't have access to food. Most of our kids go to school for food. So when I talk about picking battles, I'm saying it in a way that it's just so many other things that are affecting people of color, specifically in the city of Detroit. And I think that we're losing it by the distractions of things like Kid Rock.
Well, I mean, I would like to respectfully disagree, only because that's a financial matter. I mean, like, how much money do we really think Kid Rock is going to pull from that investment? I mean, that's a substantial amount of finances that he's going to generate off of a, race hate-filled rhetoric that is happening in our city. And as far as picking battles, man, every battle is ours to pick. I mean, I'm just being honest, because there's no way that we can ignore that and then focus on other things. But the thing is we have to have, ourselves organized and have specific folks battling that, and then have other people in the community, battling why or not, dollars aren't flowing into the actual neighborhoods. But that's absolutely a battle to pick, because they're simply flat out telling you, we don't care about what this man represents. We want your money. And guess what? We're going to go down there and spend money. Absolutely. And guess whose pocket is going into? Kid Rock and the Illich family, who have already shown you what they're about.
Anybody else?
I'm just thinking, this reminds me of a discussion that I had about different types of oppression and comparing oppressions, because I think that Kid Rock coming in and the Illich money is a form of oppression and a form of, like you were mentioning, in ignoring and being disrespectful. And I think that when compared to something like the water shutoffs, you can't necessarily compare those two oppressions, and they're both serious and they're both different and need to be addressed as such.
You can do both. That's how I feel like you can
Right.
always do both.
Yep.
So even with that, another one that's really big right now is the NFL, right? And how many people are really turning off their TVs to the NFL on Sundays? But another, one that's a lot of, and I know even me and my grandmother have had conversations about what can we do around protesting the NFL and this and that. Is this another battle? We're talking about all of these fights that we have. I just think it's so many fights that we have. And is the NFL something that's going on? I think Jay-Z just recently declined, or I don't know if it's a rumor, but he declined his performance at the Super Bowl. And it's that I think that the wrong people are fighting the battles, if that makes sense. The people that actually have the energy and the time and the effect to actually make things change, I don't think are the ones that are fighting the battles in a lot of these situations. And I think that's the disconnect, and that was more so the point that I was making about how we're picking battles. And you made a great point on us being strategic, and I don't think a lot of our battles have been strategic in how we're kind of going against it. So what do y'all think? Is this NFL battle one we can win?
I made a joke on Twitter the other day. It was like, yo, MCM still support the NFL. It's something I feel very strongly about, not even just as a black person, but as a woman. The way the NFL has glazed over abuse, sexual assault, those different things. It's just, and women are the largest growing football watching demographic. So to consistently ignore women, that's something that has always been in the back of my mind at NFL, about the NFL. But the way that they really treat their players like marionettes, like if you do this, or the way the owners say, like, if you do this or if you do that, I'm not gonna pay you and stuff like that. If Odell Beckham decided, I'm not gonna sit out a game, I'm gonna sit out a game until they start making changes, things will change. And I feel like the owners in the NFL have done whatever to put the something in their mind. Without players, there is no league. So I don't know how they got in a situation or a position where they felt like they were powerless, or this is something that they couldn't actually combat. And it's just like, it's strength in numbers. You guys have it. You all have the capacity, you all have the finances, you all have the power, the ownership, and the idea of people not standing up because, oh, it don't matter, oh, they might not get paid, oh, this XYZ. There is no league without players. There's no way. If players decide to stand up together and stick together, there is no way a protest could fail.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderfully put. Once again, systems. This is not just about the NFL. So we have to really look at this and say, well, what is the root of this? I mean, and that's one thing that I always can encourage people to do. Like, don't look at the face. Look what's behind the face, because once you start to strip down those layers, then you quickly understand what this is about. So, for example, it's not an NFL issue. It's a systematic white oppression issue in terms where white folks own the systems, black folks don't have access to capital, generally speaking, and so they control what we do, whether it's a regular workforce, or whether it's the NFL. And the bottom line is black folks, generally speaking, unfortunately, due to the way that things have been set up, we don't have capital, so we can't risk losing money. And so that's what's always in the back of folks' minds. And I'll give you a quick example. When I started my firm, I was tired of being controlled by people, and I couldn't do it anymore. And so at some point, you do get to your breaking point where you say, okay, these people don't have my best interests at heart. They don't have our people's best interests at heart. So either I'm going to continue to allow this system to perpetuate itself and keep growing, or I'm just going to go do what I do. And so I decided I'm leaving. And people were like, you are absolutely crazy, because guess what? Getting that paycheck every 2 weeks is real comfortable. What's uncomfortable is stepping out and standing up for what you believe in. And so I don't think it's just the NFL, even though that's what's being highlighted. I think you can look at every black, just virtually every black person working for some institution that was built back in the day on the backs of our people. So it's a much larger conversation.
And so I just want to switch gears just a little bit because we can go on news all day, right? But looking at politics in Detroit, who's leading this black ticket? And I think this is a conversation because I think New Era had posted something recently, New Era Detroit on their blog or website, talking about how it's crazy how you got all of these black people for city council and for different things, and then at the top of our ticket is Duggan, right? And not to criticize Duggan, I tend to just sit back and not say much when it comes to the mayoral conversation, but it's just this idea of who's leading our black ticket, because now you have Coleman Young Jr. at the forefront now as well running, but is that support there? Is that something that's going on? And it's interesting that we don't see his name at the top a lot. And so what does that look like for y'all, and is that a problem?
I mean, I'll go. I feel like I'm talking too much.
It's okay, no, we all talk as much as we want.
I mean, so this is funny. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was at an event a couple days ago, and Coleman Young Jr. just bust in the event and start handing out flyers and everything, and I was like, oh, what? I was like, what are you doing here? And then I actually had a conversation with him, it was pretty progressive. But once again, people make time for what they want to make time for, and that's one of the realest statements ever. If we really want to see change in our city, we have to make time for it. It's like if you have a woman or a man that you just started dating and you all head over heels and that's bae and all that, you hanging out with bae, you taking bae out to dinner, you know what I'm saying? Y'all doing what y'all do, right? And we have to transfer that energy into the realm of politics. And I tell my friends all the time, because I don't have kids, so and most of my friends do, and so they are tied up in okay, the system that keeps us from participating. So you got to go to that job that they own and they control you. Then you get off work, you got to take care of your kids, and then by the time the night comes, you don't have time to do anything. You're tired. So it's that system versus what do you really want to do? Are you going to make time for this? And most of the time, people say no, and that's where the system gets you, because they drain all of your energy to have you working for them, and then you have no interest in really getting actively involved in politics. And I think, once again, it's always the man behind the man or a woman.
Especially like in Detroit, I feel like the elections typically are name recognition versus everybody else. The idea of finding the best candidate or researching, I feel like that's a secondary in people's mind. People are like, oh, who has everybody else been voting for? Oh, I guess they're doing a good job. Let me keep voting for them. Making sure that people are actively informed and knowledgeable voters is a very big thing in Detroit, and I feel like it's something that I don't see people go outside to do. I feel like, especially like when we look at like districts and things like that, the same people's signs are always in the same grass in my neighborhood. The same politicians' paperwork somehow always make it to my door. It's just like, all people see is like, oh, this is the flyer that was always on my house. Oh, this is the steak that was in my neighbor's grass. When it's time to go to the polls, that's the person I'm gonna vote for. So I feel like, as just me personally, as a young person and as a person who is interested in politics and someone who wants to see change in Detroit, I make it a personal mission to make sure that at least my people are informed voters. I feel like there is no reason that Coleman Young should have been able to get to the point where he was able to run for Detroit. It's literally like he came out of nowhere, and I know he now makes a stance that he doesn't want to be like his father, or his platform is nothing like his father, but it's just like, that's what it is. It's Coleman Young, a previous mayor of Detroit, versus Mike Duggan, the mayor of Detroit, who was last year. So I feel like as voters, we didn't even get a fair opportunity to get strong candidates, or candidates that we actually know want to have a position of power in Detroit.
If I could piggyback off that though, the last election when 45 got elected, I remember distinctly. So I said, I live in Midtown, so I'm sitting on my couch, right? I'm watching the coverage, I'm watching the numbers come in. It's about 5 o'clock. And then they're saying Hillary Clinton is winning. I'm like, okay, cool. Maybe I shouldn't vote. My voting station was literally a block from my house, right? All I had to do was get up and walk. So I'm like, man, get your butt up and go walk. But the reason I'm saying that is because when I got there, I had already done all this research on my own. And don't kill me for this, but I'm not a Kim Worthy fan. And I think that, and this is going back to the name recognition point, Kim Worthy won in a landslide.
There's no reason she
in a
should
landslide, and she has there's no reason she should still be employed by this city, right? But it's name recognition. Nobody understands how many people she put in jail, black men in particular, for minuscule crimes and destroy families because she has some animosity towards black men. It has to be. So, you know, we have to be really active in terms of what we're going after, what we're trying to do, because that's how that happens. And I took great pride in voting against her. And then when I looked at the results, I was like, oh my goodness, like everybody in the city voted for her. And so, you know, we have to stop doing that and really look at what our options are and judge accordingly.
I even think about that about the city clerk position. You know, the city clerk, what they do, regulate the election. The day of the election, voting machines were down, and somehow this woman got reelected. It's just like, what more do you need?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so, what role, because obviously race is going to always play a role in something. I don't really see race not ever playing a role in something. The United States was founded on race difference. Like, somebody had to be at the bottom for whoever was in the position of power, right? And so, what's our role now? How do we tackle this, and what does forward thinking look like for the city of Detroit when it comes to race?
I don't know, that's a real tough question because, I mean, the Metro Detroit area is one of the most segregated places in the United States. So I think, I don't have too much experience on this, but I just think it's a real tough question, and you have to, it needs a lot of people at the table, and you need the right people at the table. I think that there's a lot of conversations that are happening in development and in politics throughout the city that are not including the right people, especially people from neighborhoods, and that's not okay. That's not going to create an equitable future for Detroit, and that won't create an equitable future anywhere.
Kind of what Eric was mentioning about the people at the table. I feel like when we talk about stakeholders and we talk about bringing people to the table, it's always individuals with capital, individuals with leverage, individuals with money. Like we said, especially to make an equitable future, people who want to live in Detroit and people who want to be in Detroit, past when we not a hot ticket item or when we not buzzing or something like that. Those people who are here for the longevity, like the people we see, like I said earlier, who never left, who never got the chance to be a part of the rebirth because it's something that they had always been a part of. Those are the most important people to have at the table, and that's the biggest demographic I see lack when we talk about those conversations as to who is going to make change in Detroit and how we can move Detroit forward. People who have seen Detroit past, present, and want to make change for the future, those are the people who we need to see at the table.
Yeah, and I think also one of the main things is people don't have the ability to be honest with themselves. And that's just being completely straightforward. And in this instance, I'm speaking about white folks, right? They just won't be honest. So if I tell you that I'm being racially discriminated against, don't poo-poo what I'm saying. I'm not making it up. Like, nobody wants to feel as though they're being treated differently because of their skin color. And here's the biggest problem. You can't prove it. I mean, it's this underbelly that you know this is why these people are treating you this way, but you can't prove it unless you have like some email or something.
Or recording
or
some crazy
right, like
Even when you do that still though.
Yeah, it's like, you know, you gotta walk around with a wiretap on just to prove that people are discriminating against you. And real quick, I had a former employer where I went to them on so many occasions and said, look, these people are racially discriminating against me. Went up to HR. These people are racially discriminating against me. I'm not making this up. Like, I know what I can feel it. And they didn't believe me. And so you get to that point where it's like, well, if these folks can't be honest with themselves, how are we going to solve this issue? Because they're ultimately the ones 9 times out of 10 with the power structure. So if the power structure isn't believing the so-called oppressed folks, then we have a problem. So until white folks can be honest with themselves and say, when Travis said he's being racially discriminated against, I don't think he's making that up. I think we're going to be stuck in this continuous cycle.
And I think it's interesting kind of how you said like the not believing. Even now, I see people like when individuals complain about the neighborhoods, like, oh, I don't see this being done, oh, the buses are this, X, Y, Z. it's so many people who are quick to bring facts and data, like, oh, it was this reinvestment, oh, we did this, oh, we went along. So execution is not always intent is not always translated in execution. It's just like, I understand you all did this, you put that, but people are still complaining, people are still suffering, people are still going without. What position are you in that you're like, no, I'm not going to listen to those individuals on the ground experiencing. I know what investment I put in, I know what I did, and I know what we're trying to do, and that's what's important. That's what the people should be singing as praises. It's just like, well, people not seeing that. How are you going to get it to the people? How are you going to make people understand that these resources are here to access, or these problems will be gone soon, and they saying they don't see anything? Why are we not believing those people who are saying these things are happening? And it's always an unfortunate conversation, especially when you talk about the neighborhood. We always hear about that $25 million development, or we always hear about the university districts or Boston Edison, all these nice little popping neighborhoods. But it's just like, oh, at Brightmore. I'm just like, listen, I'm on Linwood, I'm on Puritan, I'm on Dexter. I don't see none of this.
And at the end of the day, until those folks can be honest with themselves and be willing to give up some of that privilege to help somebody else, it'll continue. It's hard when you drive in a Lamborghini and then you have to sacrifice for other people and have love in your heart for other people, because this is a love issue. This is a compassion, an empathy issue. You can downgrade from your Lamborghini, to a Lexus and help a million people, theoretically speaking, right? But no, you don't want to give up that Lamborghini, which in this example is the privilege. You want to keep that privilege, and that's the issue. They can talk all day, but until you're willing to let go of some of that privilege and let some other people live, it's going to continue.
And that's something I struggle with personally, I think, is how, what spaces that I can give up my privilege and in what ways, because, and I'm trying to do, what you were talking about, what you both were talking about, is, listening to when people are saying this is an oppression that I'm facing, and, think about how I can then use my privilege and, give up my privilege in order to make a more equitable solution. So.
Well, I know that in 2017, it's crazy that race is still the middle, the root, the going point of every topic and everything that I feel like a lot of people are dealing with. And most importantly, our youth are the ones that are going to have to face that battle. And I think that together we can make great compromises and solutions to have a better future for young people specifically. But it's going to take those tough conversations. It's going to take some people really being able to be honest with themselves, and us being able to come together and make it where the people that's been there can have the fun and enjoy it just as well. But I thank y'all so much for joining this panel, and I hope so many people are learning, and so many people are going to want to learn more about what's going on in the city of Detroit. And now it's time for our Youth Spotlight. I'm so excited to be here with my Youth Spotlight today, Miss Micah Barnes. How are you today?
I'm great. I feel good. Amazing to be here, to be with you, interviewing,
And I'm excited to have you. So before we get into our topic of race, because what we're talking about today, I want to give you an opportunity to just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I currently attend Detroit Collegiate High School as a sophomore. I just do basic stuff, play sports, I'm very into school, math, ELA, science. I'm deep in there, I'm currently ready to run for our class president. I'm planning on, I don't know yet, but I plan on going to college as far as I know, majoring in criminal justice and minoring in psychology. And then I plan on going back to college to major in culinary arts and minor in pastry. So I'm pretty excited.
It's always good to have a professional and a skill, right? Something that you could do on the sideline. So let's just dive into the topic today. I just want to know, how do you identify?
As Black, African American, I've always identified as that, because it's just, walking around, you always know that you're going to have a little color to your skin. Pep in your walk, be a little struggle to your work, because it's your color,
And so when did you first identify, or did you first come into grips that, oh, I'm Black?
As I've always known, but I've never really had to encounter to be like, well, you you got color in your skin, and that's what it's gonna be. And I've never not known that I was black, or never had a doubt like, oh, maybe I could be this or that.
And so how much do you think race has played into your identity or who you are as a person?
It has a huge play in it, because it's why I work so hard now. Like, you gotta work 10 times harder being black, or just being African American, period, because we color, like, it's not just because of our generation or anything going else. It's like you got a little color to your skin, so you're gonna have to work 10 times harder to be where you want to be in life.
And so have you ever experienced racism yourself?
No, I haven't personally, but I know one day it's gonna happen. And my mother always told me never to be scared of it, but to conquer it, and put your best foot forward, because nobody can tell you that you're not something that you know you are.
And so do you think that just this identity of race, or knowing about race and being black, has that impacted your education?
No, it hasn't, but it has at the same time, because it's a reason why I work so hard to, I want to show people, like, even though I'm still young and I am black, that I still have a point, and that I'm going to prove it, and that education is the best way to get to it.
And so with that, how do you think Detroit itself can move in a positive direction to impact youth?
Starting with generations before us, not even just our grandparents, like our mothers and fathers, like, we follow in their footsteps. So if we see them being violent, we're gonna like, oh, that's the right thing to do. But I feel like if we can stand up and use our voices as our motive, and to get things done, then it could be way more positivity going on than violence and us killing each other because we're mad at whites for stuff they're doing to us. So I just feel like if we take the time to encourage ourselves, like, as blacks, and have a one-on-one, then we can encourage our youth to step up and use your voice as your motive and leverage to do something.
And so just, you kind of going right into the next question, but what do you think youth's role is in the future of Detroit?
We have a huge role, because if we don't, as a youth, is generation after generation. So as that's coming up as the next generation, then we have to use our leverage and power as youth and kids, because people are going to listen to kids. We may not have as much power as we need or want, but we have a lot of power because we're kids, and they're going to listen to us. So I feel like if we use our voice as one to upbring positive and our main goals as black people, then we can get it done.
So how do you want to leave your impact, Micah?
I feel like if I use my voice more, just telling people, like, our youth, that we can do this. Like, my voice is my main leverage to everything I do. It's more ways you can do stuff than flashing guns and money. So just use your brain and your education and stuff that you acknowledging now, and you can do anything you put your mind to.
And so lastly, if you could just give any advice to a young person out there that's watching right now, what would you tell them?
I feel like the main thing I could tell them now is your First Amendment will be your best friend, because if you got the freedom of speech and to say what you want, whether it's the right way, make sure and that's the best way to do it, the right way. If you can use your speech to do something the right way, then do it, because if people are giving you a chance to listen, then talk. Like my mom used to tell me, closed mouth don't get fed. So I always, every time I got a chance to talk, I do it, and I use it to my full extent.
I'm so excited to be talking to you right now. Thank you so much for being a part of PoliticKen, and I look forward to all that you have to give and offer to this city. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of PoliticKen. To stay involved and learn more about what we have to offer, you can check out our website at politicken.org. We'll see you next time.
Perfect.
Y'all be slow, don't I? No, I don't. Did I look okay?
Yeah, you look good.